You know, one of my favorite things to do is to travel around and see other places. And on Volunteer Gardener, we always like to take you places that are close enough to home to travel to easily. And that has brought us to the Dixon Gallery and Gardens here in Memphis, Tennessee. Dale Skaggs has been kind enough to invite us down and let us spend a little time with him here. Can you fill me in a little bit here on the formal garden? This is one of the original gardens to the property.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say welcome. And this was the estate of Hugo and Margaret Dixon. They passed away in 1974 and left the art collection, which comprises the core of the museum collection, and the gardens. They left an endowment, and it's pretty much a gift to the city of Memphis so that everyone can enjoy it.
Right.
And we're starting in the formal gardens because this is one of the legacies of Hugo Dixon. Hugo was English. This formal garden is laid out in an Italian formal style.
Pattern, right.
Italian formal pattern. And Hugo corresponded with his sister, Hope Crutchfield, and she was a landscape designer in New England. Mm-hmm. We sort of think of it as sacred because it was laid out by Hugo and Margaret.
But the design idea behind it with the 4 axes, and this is all, you know, very formal and very typical sort of an Italian kind of layout, correct?
It actually goes back to the Islamic world. Is where this garden style originated. It's 4 points that come to the center.
Right.
And the 4 points represent the 4 rivers of Islam where they come together. But it transcends religion because it's also in Judeo-Christianity. It represents the 4 rivers of Eden, and and it's a paradise. So it's an enclosed structure with these 4 directions meeting in the middle, and historically it was water, but now it's been replaced with just pathways.
So now we're on the first terrace of the formal garden, and there's a pretty good sized planting of annuals in this area. Tell me a little bit about your philosophy with the way this is planted and how it's designed.
Well, personally, I'm not a huge fan of annuals, but in a public garden situation where people are expecting a lot of wow factor and pizzazz, I think annuals provide that over the longest season. We actually do up to 3 color changes a year, and this is our summer color that's just going in, and it was actually just planted today. And we try to include, try to keep it fresh and unique, like we've put in these tree ferns.
Right, these enormous ferns.
Australian tree ferns, and this is the second year on those. We put them in the conservatory over the winter, and pull them back out and plant them out in our annual beds.
You've got coleus, you've got some plectranthus, which a lot of people would know as Swedish ivy.
And the strobilanthus,
and then the strobilanthus in the center,
Persian shield,
which is one of my favorite tropical / annual plants because of that big splash of, you know, purpley silver color that it gives in the summertime. And this is kind of a partly shaded situation here, and that's something that a lot of, you know, our viewers at home are dealing with because we are a pretty forested state and a lot of people have a lot of trees in their yard. So this gives everybody a good idea of what they might be able to grow, you know, in their own situations. Now, the cutting garden is a collaboration between the Dixon and the Garden Club of Memphis, right?
Well, the Memphis Garden Club has a long history here at the Dixon. Margaret Dixon was a member of the Memphis Garden Club.
Okay.
And so that relationship is carried on with the tradition that the Memphis Garden Club comes in twice a week and changes out arrangements in the residence and in the museum twice a week. And
you grow all the flowers here?
Yeah, we grow them all from seed. And historically, from what I understand, when we first opened, the members of the Memphis Garden Club would actually drive around with their trunk open with Oasis foam in a container, and they would arrange them in the back of their car as they drove around. But it's sort of evolved, and this cutting garden here is 10 years old, and it's served us well. We've recently done some things like added the drip irrigation to cut down on our watering and our disease problems, not spraying the foliage at night.
Sure.
So the drip irrigation has been a recent installation, and then we've sort of partitioned these off into small little manageable sections.
So you keep something blooming all the time by growing a little bit of a lot of different varieties of things.
Yeah, Troy, I like to tell people that this is a working cut flower farm. but instead of growing acres and acres of the same thing, we grow a 3 foot by 6 foot plot of each thing. So, and we sort of try to choreograph it so we may do a late crop of the same thing and an early crop and a late crop of the same plant.
Sure.
A lot of planning goes into this. Manjula Carter is our greenhouse manager. She does a fabulous job, and she works with our floriculturist Greg Francis, and they come up with the selections.
And one of the things that they might use in some of these arrangements is this really great little cabbage. Now, most people who would be familiar with an ornamental cabbage are probably used to the kind that we plant in the fall and they color it pretty in the winter and all of that. But this is bred specifically for cut flowers.
Yeah, this is Crane's Red, and it's bred for cut flowers. It's kind of interesting. We try new things for cut flowers, and this is a pretty innovative thing. Let me show you how we do this. It's a tall stalk now. We'll go in and we'll cut it down low and harvest it. Actually, when we harvest it, we'll just pull the whole thing up and then go in and cut the stem. And then when you prep it for the flower arranging, you just pull the lower leaves off. And when you're finished, probably go up higher even. It almost looks, in bud, it looks like almost like a rosette of a rose. And these work really well in floral arrangements. You know, we try to make it, a lot of visitors come here, and this is kind of a destination. It's the sunniest part of of the Dixon, and because there's flowers, people are always drawn to the flowers.
Sure. You sort of trick some plants into flowering for you every year that might not normally. Things like foxgloves, larkspur, those kinds of things.
We try to do innovative things in the garden and try to do the unusual and sort of push the envelope in many respects.
Right.
Our foxglove display in May was just incredible this year. Some of the others that we talked about were the opium poppies. And we just directly sow those. They don't transplant very well. They have a tap root.
So you just put those straight into the ground.
Straight into the ground in one of these
germinate.
plots.
They go through the winter as a tiny little plant, get their cold treatment.
Right, and the opium poppies, when I lived in Oregon, you could grow them and they would go through the summer and they would actually bloom in the fall. But here, because it's too hot, and the larkspur is the same way, we direct sow it in September. And it sort of avoids the Memphis heat.
Yeah, and you get seedlings in the fall, and then they overwinter as tiny little plants, come up and bloom in the spring.
It's a real neat way to kind of push the envelope and grow some non-traditional plants here.
Another plant that you have in the cutting garden that I have found kind of fascinating is this burgundy okra. And it's got a pretty leaf as well as a really pretty pod. Is this totally ornamental or edible also?
It's edible. We're not growing it to eat, but it is edible, and I think it'll turn green if you cook it. But it's primarily grown as a cut flower. We use it in arrangements, and it gives a unique sort of feel to a flower arrangement.
Well, you know, I've been here now in the fall, in the winter, and today in the early summer, and I have to say that the Dixon has been beautiful every season that I've been here.
Yeah, it truly is a garden for all seasons.
Well, thank you so much for letting us come today. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you all, if you're in Memphis, will stop by the Dixon Gallery and Gardens because it's well worth your visit.